Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us. A special episode of our show today. As many of you know, our friend and longtime colleague and mentor, Rick Cluff, has died. And while there is so much sadness at his passing, this next hour will be a time to remember what a wonderful man, colleague, friend, and mentor he was to so many. We'll speak to some of his longtime friends and hear from you as you share your favorite memories of Rick. I'm Amy Bell, and this is BC Today. Thank you for joining us on radio, TV, and live stream. Today, a celebration of our dear friend and colleague, Rick Cluff. Rick passed away yesterday at the age of 74. We want you to share your memories and stories of Rick with us. Our number is 604-669-3733. You can also call us at 1-800-825-5950. Or you can hit pound 690. You can also email us at bctoday@cbc.ca. And like so many people here at the CBC, I'm grieving the loss of my friend, but I'm also remembering just what a truly remarkable person Rick was. Endlessly generous, kind, and thoughtful. He was a true friend and such a incredible person. And while we may be sad, today's show is a chance for us all to celebrate Rick. Call us at 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733, pound 690 on your cell phone. Email bctoday@cbc.ca. Broadcasting out of Studio 10, where Rick spent countless mornings, dark and early. I'm joined now by two of his former colleagues, but more importantly, very close friends. Margaret Gallagher is the host of North by Northwest, but for many years was the reporter on the Early Edition. Hi, Margaret.
Hello, Amy.
Thanks for coming in today.
Oh, well, it's just a pleasure to be able to remember Rick in the company of so many people who loved him. And I include with that the many, many listeners who we're hearing from. And I'll give a little warning. I get a little teary. I need to grab that box of Kleenex over there.
There's been a lot of tears since we all got the news yesterday.
But so many good memories well, which we will talk about.
Yeah, and that's what we're here for today. We want to move past the tears as much as we can and just celebrate him. Also joined by the one and only Fred About Town. Fred Lee rang his cowbell with glee with Ricky for many years. It's so nice to have you back in the studio.
It's wonderful to be back, and thank you so much for the invitation. It's lovely to be back here with all of you and the CBC family and this place that we called home.
So many laughs in here, too, with Rick.
Absolutely.
And that's what I've always been, since he retired and coming in here every morning and doing other shifts. Whenever I sit in the host chair, I just think, I'm sneaking Dad's chair. But, it's so nice to have such a memory of him imprinted in such a space where we spend time. Because he made a mark no matter where he went.
An indelible mark, for sure.
Yeah, and not just because of his radio show. For his genuine, he was just, a teddy bear. He was an incredibly generous, kind, lovely person.
He certainly, and very quickly, he made an indelible mark, not only here at the CBC, but as you said, Amy, he was just a tremendous community leader.
Yeah.
And I'm looking forward to hearing from our listeners and hearing about the impact that Rick made, in the community. And I will miss our dear friend for sure. But I'm looking forward to hearing the wonderful memories that he brought to so many.
Yeah, and he did.
Indeed. And speaking of laughs, his laugh.
Oh, God.
It would just wrap you up like a big hug. And he always had a joke. Sometimes he was the king of the dad jokes, I would say.
Oh, he was the king of the dad jokes. And I am a longtime fan of them. So, yeah, it's his humor was incredible. But, yeah, that laugh Get you every time. I do want you guys to hear something, or for everybody to hear something. One of Rick's, I know, favorite interviews that he talked about often was when he spoke to Mr. Rogers. And it did come just after they found out about the death of his friend Ernie Coombs, who we all know is Mr. Dress Up. But Ernie was a mutual friend to both these men. And so they came together right after his death to remember and celebrate him.
Oh boy, that's a tune familiar to so many, many Canadians. It opened each and every show of Mr. Dress Up, the immensely popular children's program that ran on CBC television for more than 30 years. Ernie Coombs, the man who created and played Mr. Dress Up, passed away this morning in Toronto after suffering from the complications of a stroke that he was struck with earlier this week. He was 73. Fred Rogers, perhaps better known as Mr. Rogers, knew Ernie Coombs since his earliest days in children's television. And Mr. Rogers joins me on the line now from his neighborhood, Nantucket, Massachusetts. Good morning, Mr. Rogers.
And to you, Rick, from one ocean to another. I think about Ernie and all that he has meant to Canadian children and now their children, as I know you must. You were such a good friend of Ernie's. I wonder how you are able to go on the radio and help people begin their days when I know you must have a heavy heart.
I do indeed, but at the same time, I remember only the good things that Ernie Coombs, Mr. Dress Up, meant to many people. And that's the legacy of people like him and yourself. All the good he created and the little bright ray of sunshine he brought into every young person's life in this country day after day after day.
And I think, of course, the same could be said for Rick. He was just a spark of joy, every dark and early morning. He truly was. We do have a couple of calls already on the line I'd like to take. George in North Vancouver. How are you doing today, George?
I'm doing great. How about you guys?
Oh, well, we're doing okay. Thanks so much for calling. What do you remember about Rick?
Rick made history. In 1957, the second Narrows Bridge collapsed and 19 men died. And it was soon forgotten. Biggest tragedy in Vancouver's industrial history. Mm-hmm. I had the good fortune to make a documentary about the bridge and interviewed a guy who filmed it all. And the story was interesting and it was good, but it wasn't finished, because I needed somebody today to talk about the bridge. Turns out when Rick came to Vancouver, he discovered it was called the Second Narrows Bridge, and he decided it would be called the Ironworkers Memorial Second Narrows Bridge. And he made that happen, and it's still called that today. So Rick changed Vancouver history.
He certainly did in so many ways. George, thank you for calling in and reminding us of that. It's very much appreciated.
Take care.
Right now, it is 12:14, and you are listening to BC Today. And we're going to take a little bit of time to read a couple of texts that we've already gotten in today. Some of them are really remarkable. Family friend Kelly texted us to say that Rick was their cheerleader, had a kind heart, and was a great hugger. He was always interested in our young lives, and I feel blessed to have known such an iconic personality and lifelong host on a personal level. Terry from Port Moody texted to say how he loved how Rick and his colleague, Lee Rosevere, would spar over music. Rick always helped my wife and me start the day with optimism. His legacy will ripple through the ages. And I think Rick and Lee's sparring over many things was a great highlight for many.
Is Lee wearing pants?
Patrick from Harrison Hot Springs texted that his favorite memory of Rick Cluff was every Monday morning when he would leave the social scene report from Fred Lee. You just knew that there was going to be 3 to 5 minutes of Rick being amazed at the words coming out of Fred's mouth.
Yes. It's incredible. I honestly did not think that segment was going to last 15 minutes, let alone 15 years.
Oh, you never know.
I have obviously my friend Margaret Gallagher here and Laura Palmer and everyone for their encouragement and for seeding the idea. And I didn't realize how important that segment was going to mean to myself personally. And I have to thank Rick. I honestly, he's a consummate professional. I was an upstart. I had no idea what I was doing. And he was incredibly patient. And I'm just grateful for the large desk that was in front of us because I was terrible. And yet somehow that was the seed of an incredible friendship that has lasted beyond the 15 years. So we certainly shared a lot of good times together, for sure.
Yeah, it is pretty incredible. I do have one other colleague that I would like to bring on, of course. Everybody will know your own host of BC Today, Michelle Eliot. Michelle also directed the Early Edition with Rick for many years. Hi, Michelle.
Hi, Amy. Hi, Margaret. Hi, Fred.
It's been a sad 24 hours since we all found out the news. What do you really remember most about Rick?
My jaw dropped when I heard our caller talk about him having a hand in naming the Iron Workers Memorial Bridge, because I remember him talking about how important it was to refer to it as that. Amy, when you would come on and do your traffic reports, he would always say it's important to refer to it as the Iron Workers Memorial Bridge to memorialize those workers who died. And I had no idea he had a hand in that. He never mentioned it, but it was so important to him. I remember a lot of the little conversations we would have in between interviews. I was there early in the morning in the control room with Lee and Amy. You'd be outside Studio 10 waiting to come in for your traffic reports, and Rick would be there. And in between, we would argue over what stories we would cover on the show, a lot of party debate, and over little things, like, we all know he loved food, right? He was a real foodie.
He was a real foodie before that was even a term, I think. He just loved it.
It's so true. I mean, I started out as an intern at CBC, and Rick was known on the third floor in the old CBC building as the foodie. And he would throw these amazing parties with just wonderful little appetizers. And he would talk about the food and describe him, in this mellifluous way. But we would talk about food, and I remember getting into a debate over zucchini because he was not a fan of zucchini and I loved zucchini. But I learned so much about enjoying food and living life. And he had he had such a musical background as well. People will know about his musical history and his father working in the music industry. And we talked about how, I loved Oscar. I love Oscar Peterson. He'd say, "Oh, I grew up with him. I'm in the studio." To me, he was just Mr. Peterson. And I couldn't believe these stories and his history with very notable people. But he was just a pleasure to work with over the course of 3 hours in the studio, because we would have those little interactions. And at the same time, I heard Norman Stowe on the radio yesterday talking about how he made every guest feel important, no matter who it was, whether it was the Governor General. I mean, we had a lot of notable people come into the studio for interviews, and parents talking about their children. He was equally fascinated, equally excited and eager to hear their story. And he just had a way, how easygoing he was. He had a way of making people feel at ease and wanting to share more just with one question. I know I'd go in and talk to him after the show, and I'd say, "How did you do that? What that one question just got them to open up." And he'd share his wisdom. So that's what I remember, for my time directing, was his stories, our conversations. Oh, and the hardest thing about directing Rick, any person who's directed Rick will know. You know this, Amy. It was keeping him to time. Because he always had one more question, just one more thing he wanted to ask. He was, "Oh, no, we've got World Report coming up." But he was that interested and that curious.
He was.
He just always wanted to know more. Yeah.
But yes, keeping him on time to the clock was a source of constant stress for you. I do remember that. We'll take in a call now from Moeen. Hi, Moeen. I believe you were interviewed by Rick once.
Hi, Amy.
Hi.
Yeah, my name's Moiseen Hasham. I'm born and raised in Vancouver, but I actually live in Toronto. I've been here for over a decade. But yeah, back in 2006, I actually won tickets to go to the NHL Awards that were at the Centre for Performing Arts in Vancouver. And I had reached out to, I think it was Sherelle Tobin at the time,
Yep.
and said, look, I'd love to come on the radio tomorrow morning. It would have been a Friday morning, I think, just to talk about the awards show and what it's like from a fan's perspective, what it is that you would see, the people that I had met. And I just remember his hearty laugh, first of all, and his love and enthusiasm for sports, right? It was really seamless. And it was the first time I'd ever been interviewed on the radio. And fast forward to what I do now in life, I actually work directly with the Canucks and the NHL to deliver inclusion in hockey programs. And so we've got a newcomer girls program in Surrey. And I feel like, when we did the launch last year, I feel like it would have been so great to reach out to him just to say, hey, like, this is what I'm doing now. Like, that experience that I had at CBC in Vancouver with him played a small role in the work that I do, because I'm often talking to media about the work that we do and being interviewed. So it was like I cut my chops the way that Fred talked about, kind of, getting that first crack at it. But just, I remember his warm smile and just, his enthusiasm and that great big hearty laugh. I mean, it's definitely something I won't forget.
No, that is such an incredible thing to share, and you just nailed it. And Moisey, Rick absolutely would have interviewed you about what you're doing now. He would have been so proud and impressed. So way to go, and thank you again for reaching out.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, and my condolences to the whole team there at CBC Vancouver. Certainly a big loss, but a lot of the memories just listening to the show today. It's really nice to hear some BC West Coast flavor here out in Toronto. So thank you for doing this show.
Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your day. Of course, we want to keep hearing from you. You can call us at 604-669-3733, 1-800-825-5950, and you can also email bctoday@cbc.ca. Right now, we are joined still by Margaret Gallagher, who was the former reporter for the Early Edition with Rick for so many years. How many years was it, Margaret?
It's 16.
16.
I thought it was 17, but it's 16. But you know what? I just remember the very first time I met Rick was as a guest on the Early Edition. And I was terrified. I was talking about Asian Heritage Month on a panel, but I still remember, first, it was amazing to meet the person behind this voice that I felt like was my friend already for years, because of the years when he did the sports. And I didn't even really care about sports, just saying, but I cared because Rick cared. He made me care because of his passion.
Right.
And he made it so inviting and so comfortable. And then somehow I ended up working with him, and it was a dream come true for sure. And again, he's mentored so many people. He had a way of making everybody feel comfortable, unless they weren't supposed to feel comfortable, because he was a very good journalist as well, and he would put people in the hot seat when he needed to.
Very true.
Incredibly versatile.
And I think a lot of people underestimated him for that, just because he was such a boisterous, warm, as I said, a teddy bear of a man. But he was an incredibly impeccable journalist. And yes, exactly. If you shouldn't feel comfortable around Rick, he would let you know that. And of course, today's show, we are just celebrating our dear friend and colleague, Rick Cluff, who passed away yesterday. In studio, I'm joined by Margaret Gallagher. Fred Lee's also returned, where he spent so many Monday mornings with Ricky. and the cowbell.
Yes.
And of course, Michelle Eliot, BC Today host, but she also worked on the Early Edition for many years and tried to direct Rick whenever.
And Amy, I spent some time as an early morning reporter as well, and speaking to Rick's journalism. I was working the morning of 9/11, And I remember, being just a young reporter, hearing him so calmly uh, steering the show through the morning as people were waking up to this terrible news. And I could hear him asking for background on the Twin Towers, just asking for more information, very calmly, very focused, very professional, all throughout that morning. And so certainly he was an impeccable journalist. Absolutely.
Yeah, he was just incredible. We'll take another line now to the show. We will reach out to Dean in Abbotsford. Hi, Dean. How are you?
Hi, it's Dave.
Dave,
And,
I'm sorry.
Hi, Amy. My condolences, first of all, to all the Rick's family and to everybody there. I remember Rick being warm and very willing to take risks. He came to Abbotsford a couple of times, once to do an early morning reach-out show, the Early Edition from Abbotsford, when the new repeater was opening up. And that's the repeater that I'm happy to listen to all the time, because the Vancouver signal gets kind of choppy as it gets into Abbotsford. And the other remembering that I have is he also assisted us in the Fraser Valley with brain injury. We have a brain injury association, and in those days we were always having to do a lot of fundraising. And we had a big fundraiser gala, and he came out and was the MC. And he was warm and charming and very accepting to the diverse crowd that you have. A lot of people with brain injury would attend, and some of them were very challenged, but he was always warm and accepting. And he was a great ambassador for CBC out in the community.
He was so great with people, and he was so accepting and understanding. So I really appreciate you calling in, Dave. Thanks so much.
Okay.
Take care. We also are joined now by Ross Verbabigliati, who, of course, was interviewed by Rick many years ago. Hi, Ross. Thanks for calling in.
Hi. Thanks for having me.
So what was your experience like with Rick?
Yeah, so I had, I just freshly had come home from competing at the Olympics in Nagano back in 1998, and things got a little crazy for me over there. And, around the whole cannabis story. Yeah. And I was really nervous going in to do the interviews and all the media when I got back to Canada. But when I came in to do Rick's show, he just seemed like a beacon of normality for me and just made me feel super comfortable. And, I just thought about Rick over the years and was recently just thinking about him. And, it's just a little bit sad, obviously, to have somebody like that, who kind of touched me in that way back in the day and made me feel, like a normal guy. And, so I just wanted to share that.
And I really appreciate that. He was a beacon of normality. What an incredible way to put it. Thank you so much for calling in, Ross. And Michelle, before we let you go, is there any final thoughts you want to share about Rick?
I've heard a lot, many, many final thoughts. First, I just want to say I was so saddened to hear the news yesterday and saddened that I wasn't there with my colleagues, with you, Amy, and with Cheryl and everybody else who worked so closely with him. So I'm so glad to be here with you now, to remember Rick and to remember Rick with our audience as well, as they got to know him so well over the 20 years here in Vancouver. Yeah. He's been spoken of as a mentor, and he really was to everybody, like a fatherly figure, right? To his whole team. He made sure everybody shone. With Leah Rosevere, he always made sure to read the credits with aplomb at the end of the week, to really highlight the work of his team. And that he always made sure to pause so that Lee could do his little horn right before he said Lee's name, because he was all about showcasing his team. Yeah. And for myself, we spent some time together. I started hosting, and his biggest advice was be yourself. Which is the most valuable piece of advice you can give to someone, I think. And he was himself. He was his easygoing, his caring, welcoming, jovial self. And that really shone through, it seeped through the radio every morning. And it certainly was something that we all to have been able to be a part of and witness as we worked with him. So really such a sad loss for us. I'll always remember my time with Rick.
So well said. Thank you for joining us today, Michelle. I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you, Amy.
And you are listening to BC Today. The CBC News is next with Robert Zimmerman.
Good afternoon. The federal and provincial governments say they have finalized a deal that will provide more than $1.6 billion in federal funding to BC communities over the next 5 years. Infrastructure Canada says local governments in the province will receive $300 million of that funding this year and into next year. More than $825 million, about half of the 5-year total, will go to TransLink. One person is dead, but 2 others survived after a helicopter crashed south of Invermere last night. Police say the pilot, who was a local ranch owner, was killed, while the 2 passengers suffered non-life-threatening injuries. There's no word on what may have led to the crash. And BC's Ministry of Health says a new urgent care centre is coming to Vancouver Island. The Cowichan Urgent and Primary Care Centre is set to open next year in Duncan. The ministry says the centre will offer health services to people who don't need an emergency room. And now the forecast on the north coast, mainly sunny this afternoon with a high of 15, highs up to 19 with a chance of showers and thunderstorms in the Peace. In the central interior, a mix of sun and cloud with a high of 20. Highs from 19 to 26 with some sunshine and a chance of showers in the Kootenays. In the southern interior, mainly sunny with a high of 26 as well. And for Metro Vancouver, Greater Victoria, and the Fraser Valley, lots of sunshine this afternoon with highs up to 23 inland. That's your CBC News update from Vancouver.
Thank you, Robert. And of course, asking you if you have any quick memories to share of our dearly departed Rick Cluff.
Well, it was just, for a guy who got up at 3 o'clock in the morning he was just totally upbeat and funny and positive. It was just not an easy thing to do when you have to get up that early in the morning.
Yeah.
And when people mention, he was such a great mentor, totally true. Just, he would give you positive advice and just in such a caring sort of positive way. He just wanted you to get better, and he was just super giving dude, good, great guy to be around. Yeah,
he was
really good.
Thank you very much. Rob, I'll just quickly read a few more kind words that we've gotten. Marg used to listen to Rick on Metro Morning when he did the sports updates. He occasionally provided traffic news if he was stuck on Highway 400. When we moved here, it was great to hear him on the radio again. He gave his all to many. And Kim said she listened to Rick when she moved here from England. He had a smooth, gentle voice to wake up to. Then one day he was her patient in the hospital. He was as nice in person. I am blessed to have met him. Mark from Victoria texted that Rick's warmth always came through. He was especially sensitive interviewing Margaret Trudeau, who was discussing her bipolar diagnosis. And Mark says he does still tune in to the Early Edition. You are listening to BC Today, and we are remembering our friend and longtime Early Edition host, Rick Cluff. We're joining you from Studio 10, where, of course, Rick spent all of his mornings hosting that show. Rick connected to so many people, and we are thankful for all of you that have been sharing your just lovely, heartwarming memories of him. Call us at 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733, pound 690 on your cell phone, and you can email bctoday at cbc.ca. I've had Margaret Gallagher and Fred Lee, both longtime friends of Rick. Both have worked on the Early Edition with them. I'm also joined right now by another former Rick colleague, and that is Jason D'Souza. Jason's the host of Victoria's Afternoon Show, All Points West, and he was an associate producer on the Early Edition for many years. Hi, Jason.
Hey, Amy, thank you so much for having me. on
Oh,
the show
thank
today.
you so much for joining us today. I know that Rick meant a lot to you, and you got to sit beside him for many days. What was that like?
Day one of my internship, Amy, as the Peter
You were
Zofsky
green.
intern. Oh my gosh, was I ever green? No journalism background at all. I remember walking into the Early Edition pod, and there was only one desk available in the entire team, and it was right next to the main man. I was so nervous already going in, and realizing I had to sit next to Rick made me that much more nervous. But honestly, Amy, in hindsight, and thinking and listening to all these stories of Rick, I just realized how lucky I am that that was the one seat available. It felt like every day I had this giant of a broadcaster, this legend of a broadcaster all to myself. And I'd get the chance to hear all his amazing stories, all the incredible interviews he did over the course of his career. I should also say I was, so new to journalism that every morning I would just be like, Rick, you're talking too much to me. I need to find a story. I need to pitch a story. Stop talking to me. But again, as I say, it was one of the best things to ever happen to me. And, one of the words I've been hearing over the course of the last 24 hours, listening to so many people talk about Rick and reminisce about Rick is his mentorship. And I really feel like as a CBC host today, so much of that is all thanks to Rick. I had my first foray into hostdom at the CBC, getting a 1-year contract opportunity here in Victoria back in the day. And it was Rick's guidance the entire way through when he found out that I'd become to Victoria, sitting me down, asking me to come into the morning, walking me through his interviews, making sure I felt as prepared as possible. And then once I got here, every Friday, he would send me a text saying, hey, I listened to this interview, and this interview. Here's what you did well. Here's what I want you to improve on. And getting quite emotional thinking about that. But it just goes to show, this incredible broadcaster who he himself, so busy hosting this massive program, always took the time out to make sure you felt heard and felt comfortable, and just a wonderful, wonderful human being.
He was so caring, and I don't think it was an accident that the interns were sitting next to him, Jason, but he was so proud of you. But there was never any jealousy with Rick. He never saw anybody as a threat. He was at his happiest when he was lifting somebody up. Nothing made him feel better than seeing somebody that he'd worked with or mentored just go soaring off. He didn't. Yeah. He didn't bear grudges. He didn't feel like he was owed anything, and it's a remarkable quality.
Honestly, you nailed it. It was his best quality. He celebrated your successes as his own, and this is an industry where it can be competitive, and sometimes you can be in a situation where you're wondering where you can get that mentorship from. It was always so genuine from Rick, and as I say, I've never felt that way before, where someone just constantly wanted to see you do well and make it in this business. The only time I felt like Rick wasn't celebrating my successes, I don't know if I can say this, but was all of the times I beat him in all the sports pools that he would run. That was the only time where he wasn't happy for me.
Okay, yes, that is the only time that Rick was not rooting for anybody else when it came to this sports betting. Other than that, though, yes.
I couldn't echo more than what Jason just said, because he was always in your corner, and he wanted everyone to be successful. And to get a note from Rick, and recently I got a note from Rick because I had received an accolade, and he was so proud to hear the news. And that was the kind of person he was. He was always there. He was like your dad, rooting for you, and was so proud of your success. And it just speaks volumes of the man.
He lifted everybody up,
Yes.
and he celebrated, as you say, Rick, and he never took credit for the huge
No.
role that he had
Absolutely.
in so many
Yeah.
people's lives. I owe so much to Rick as a broadcaster, but also as a friend, and he had so many other facets too. You know, he was in a production of The Music Man, for example. He was an incredible wrapper of gifts.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And buyer of gifts. I think, every coworker's child their birthday was remembered. Christmas was remembered. He was so generous. And, I think, Margaret, you and I were talking, he was my work dad. For others, he was there, for Lee, that was his work big brother. And he had that relationship with so many people. And no matter how much you tried to get him to take credit, he wouldn't. I've tried to thank him so many times for the guidance he's given me. And he just says, oh, no, it's all you. But so much of it is him. I'll take another call, and this is Heather Kennedy. Hi, Heather.
Hi. I'm a little bit tongue-tied because I'm feeling such a wave of emotion as I listen to the program and think of you all there and how close you were to Rick and how hard this is, while also celebrating who he was. But I wanted to quickly share a story because, as you know, I worked at CBC for many years. I was in the 700 Hamilton for 18 years, and so Rick's and my paths crossed. And I remember when he first came to Vancouver, and there was a little bit of uncertainty, this sportscaster, who's this guy? And almost immediately, he just charmed the building and the city through the force of his personality and his genuine warmth. And I hardly saw him because I worked a day shift, and he had a long commute to get home after the show. But I would see him occasionally on Fridays. And one Friday, it was 3 p.m, and he was still there. And I said, Rick, what are you doing here? And he was a little hesitant at first, but I pressed him, and he said, well, I have a little thing I do on the downtown east side. On Fridays, I go to First United Church, and I help out with a project. And it was a meal serving project. St. David's United Church in West Van had a slot, and they would serve meals to people in that community. And Rick had connected with them. And so Fridays, he would go down there, and he'd be the guy dishing up the food. It was not because he was a big, famous radio host. It was simply he saw a need, and he saw a community, and he wanted to be part of it. And he took me down there, and he introduced me to those people who were working there, and more importantly, to the people who came to share food and communion. And it really had a transformational effect on my life through him connecting with that experience. And there's so many things I remember and love about Rick, but that alone speaks to how he was always ready to give more, and he wasn't looking for the limelight. He just gave and gave and gave because he had a heart as big as the world.
Such a wonderful way to put it, Heather. Thanks so much. It was so nice to hear from you. Take care.
You're welcome. And again, my deep, 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 deep condolences and hugs to you all.
Thank you. And deep condolences and hugs to not just all of his friends and colleagues, but we're also holding his family so closely in our hearts. Many of our listeners know him and Cecilia Walters, who worked side by side together for so many years, were in fact together, and they were recently married. As that was one of Rick's greatest wishes, and they're now 5 grandchildren. We're so loved and adored. So our hearts are with them all. Jason, I know that you were by his side for so long. What aspects of him do you really take with you as you've moved into your own hosting role?
I think about that a lot, actually, Amy. And I was looking through some old texts because, as I said, Rick would always send me a text when I first started hosting on Friday evenings after the week, after he listened to the programming. And one of the things that I do all the time, subconsciously now, but through Rick's guidance, is I never drop the word me on the program. And, one of the things you'll quite often hear in a broadcast is so-and-so is the director of this, and he joins me now. Thanks for being with me on the program. And I got this text from Rick saying, hey, drop the me's, drop the I's. One of the things you have to realize, especially on a medium like radio, is it is the most inclusive of all the platforms. People are joining you in their car, at their kitchen table. So always remember that they're not joining you, they're joining us. And it was one of those texts where I immediately put into action. Didn't think about it until looking back at it now, but yeah, it's always joining us on the program. Thanks for being here with us. And that's who Rick was. He was such an inclusive guy. And I think one thing I'd want the listeners to also know that, you know, they don't get to see behind the scenes was the team dynamics Rick created. And again, as a host right now, it's something I really try to take away. The leadership parts of the job of having the privilege of hosting a program is the atmosphere you want to create. And Rick created the best atmosphere. He was so generous, not just with his time, but you know, sometimes he would get Canuck tickets and he'd always hand them out to someone, especially the interns. Whenever he had the opportunity to be a part of something, he always brought you along. Yeah. And you really felt, and Amy, I know you know this better than anyone, that you were with family. Like those morning shifts where you were part of the broadcast, amazing. I mean, partly it was because Amy baked the most amazing cakes, and you know, it was a great experience, but it was because Rick.
I fully bribed my way into this team. We all know that.
Like one of the best bakers I've ever known. But Rick really emphasized the atmosphere. And he took that part of the job so seriously. And I think maybe I took it for granted when I started, but now certainly as a host myself, I really try to draw upon that warmth, that inclusivity, that team dynamic that makes you want to come into work, that makes you so excited to do the job. Yeah. Daily news is not always easy, and sometimes it can be a grind. And certainly these days, you know, it can be a challenging place to work. And I just always will remember the atmosphere that Rick created that just made you so keen to come in and get to do the job that we get to do.
Yeah, he did make every day just such an incredible adventure. We'll go now to Deborah in Surrey. Hi, Deborah.
Hi there. Thank you for. I hope I can do this without crying, but
well, you'd be the only one. We're all a little weepy here today.
Rick lived in Ocean Park, not far from us, and his kids went to school with mine, and I got to know him well. I had my own communication consultancy, and I had lots of events and fundraisers that he willingly hosted, from Corleone to Ocean Park wine tastings to fundraisers I did for the Maritime Museum. And he was always willing to. I taught PR for 12 years, and he was always willing to come and speak to my students. And when they sent off their first news release, he was often the first to say, sure, come on in for an interview. And those kids, they were on a high for so long after that. He made them feel so welcome and always made me welcome, even though I felt like I was pestering him all this time for just one more host, please. Come on and help. Just help the fundraising that we do so hard in the area and across in Vancouver as well. He just, no matter that he got up at 4 o'clock in the morning or 3, he was always there at 7:30 or 8 to host an event for me. And it was marvelous. Marvelous man, generous, great personality. I remember how humble he was. I introduced him as one of the top morning programs, radio programs, and he said, no, I'm not up there. I said, yes, you are. You're the lead. And he wouldn't accept that. He said, no, I'm one of many. And you had a wonderful man and a team member that embraced you as you embraced the audience.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for sharing that. And, you know, I don't know how many times I heard Rick say he was just driving the bus.
It's true.
And I think about that often, is he had every right to just take, credit for all that success, because it was a credit to him, and he absolutely would not. He wanted each and every person that came on this show, even if it was just a one-time guest, to know how special they were. We're kind of coming to the end of the show, but I really want to get just sort of last thoughts from each of you. Fred, what do you want people to most remember about Rick?
I just want people to remember that he was just an incredible human. He was the consummate professional behind the mic, but there was this other side that I think many of us got to see, whether we were at the CBC or in the community. He genuinely cared about his family, his friends, and community. Yeah. And I think we heard that from the callers today and all the wonderful comments, but he truly cared. Not only did Metro Vancouver welcome him, he gave back. He introduced himself to so many worthy causes and was a champion for everyone. He was... Anyways, I will forever miss my friend, and I'm so grateful for the time that we've had and all the learning. Mm-hmm. So take care, my friend. This one's for you. One in a million.
I've been waiting all hour for that.
Oh, yeah.
Margaret, any last words?
Oh, so many thoughts. And he just cared so much about the world around him, and he wanted other people to care as well. I think that is his great gift, is he had this passion and this compassion, and he wanted to pass it on around, and he just noticed the small things. Can I tell one tiny quick story?
Yep.
We used to always go for breakfast after remotes, and he would notice that I always ordered hot sauce, and so he made sure he would give me little bottles of hot sauce just to make sure. It's just a little thing.
The little things, but it means so much.
It does.
Jason, how about you? Any final little tidbits you want to share?
I'm so grateful to everyone who's called in and shared their stories. And I think, the big takeaway that I want everyone to remember about Rick was his generosity, his kindness, what an incredible human being he was, and mainly how much he loved the listenership. Rick would, and the same, he would always talk about, he wasn't broadcasting across Metro Vancouver. He was talking to you. It's you and me, whether you're in your kitchen, whether in your car. And I think, just a tremendous, tremendous human being. And I feel so lucky and so privileged to be able to call him my friend and certainly my mentor.
A mentor and a friend to so many, and somebody that he mentored and was a friend to for so long is Lee Rosevere, his longtime technician. And Lee did write an email to me, and I'll just read you a little bit from it. It says, "There's not much I can say that hasn't already been said about Rick. And what a warm, friendly, curious, encouraging, funny, and wonderful person he was. But personally, I think our common shared interest in making work a fun place to be was so important. If I had a nickel for every time he said, 'How cool is it that we get to do this every day?' I think it was one of the reasons why the Early Edition became the #1 show in Vancouver while we were working together. The infectious sound of the show made by people who loved what they did, and it showed. I learned so much about radio, about interviewing, and about work culture just from being around him. Anytime a new colleague would join the Early Edition, Rick was there first with a handshake, a smile, and a, 'Hi, I'm Rick. Who are you? Where are you from? What do you like to do?' He genuinely cared about everyone who worked for him. He often said that he was just the bus driver of the show, but he was more than that. He was the moral center. He set the tone, the attitude, the way we did things. Rick Cluff is a state of mind, if you will. I have so many short stories that I'll keep with me that I would love to tell here, but it would literally take hours. Rick always kept in touch, even on the other side of the country. Whenever I got the chance to backfill host the afternoon show over the summer here in Charlottetown, Rick always listened, sending me thumbs up emojis, encouraging me all the way. I am so lucky and fortunate to have worked with him for so long. I'm proud to call him a good friend, and I will always think of him. I'm sorry I can't be there, but sending a big hug to you, Fred, Margaret, Sherelle, Teresa, Renee, and Jake, and of course to Cecilia, Mallory, and James. Thank you for that, Lee. And thank you to all of you for joining me today, for the audience, for sharing your thoughts of Rick to help us celebrate it. Margaret, Fred, and Jason, thank you for making today so special. And thank you to Michelle Eliot for remembering Rick with us. And before we go, we will leave you with one of Rick's favorite songs, Ray Charles and Count Basie, "Oh, What a Beautiful Morning."